morning. I am here with Charlie O'Hara, our attorney that comes in every Wednesday to answer your legal questions. Give us a call if you have one. Hi there, Charlie.
Hi, how are you?
Good to have you back in the studio. We have a couple of great questions on the line. We're going to get to those right now. Good morning. What's your question for Charlie?
Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning.
I have a neighbor who has a tree planted right on the property line or just on the other side. It's been there a long time. It's dying limb by limb, but some of the limbs hang over the fence and into my property, and they are so large and long that they hit you in the head when you try to mow the backyard. And I want to know if I can legally go out there and trim those limbs off.
Good question.
Well, it is a good question. I'm not positive of all the laws on that, but I think you can kind of take a reasonable approach. The first thing you ought to do is get a hold of your neighbor and see if there's a way that your neighbor and you can settle this problem. And if the tree's dying, it ought to be cleaned up and probably taken out. If the neighbor's reluctant to do that, if it's interfering with your property, you're going to have to do something. And if you try to solve it and they won't solve it, then you're going to have to cut the limbs there in your yard. I think that's the appropriate way to do it. That way you're less likely to get sued or anything like that. You always want to try to settle something without having to do something drastic with people and be reasonable. Most people are reasonable if you go over and talk to them about things. But if you just do things without asking them, sometimes it makes them angry. So I would first talk to my neighbor. If that didn't work, then I think you can go ahead and cut it and tell the neighbor I tried to work with you and you wouldn't do anything. They're in my yard. So they're in your yard. You can do something.
Okay, great question. I know we've had that come up a lot, too.
That's true.
From neighbors, but always talking to them first is
Neighbors are always, if you get in a war with your neighbors, it's a real bad thing. You ought to always try to talk to them.
So in the tone will say a lot.
Yes, it will.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. We're going to go ahead and get to the next question on the line. Hi there, good morning. What's your question?
Yeah, I want to talk about the river and kayaking on it and the law on that.
Well, I don't exactly know. The city has a lot of laws, and I'd have to look those up, and I haven't had a chance to look those up. I would think, and the city has their laws on their website. If you go to their legal department and law, you can look up the law, and you could probably easily find out if they have any restrictions on kayaking. Obviously, I think, from what we know, I think they had some restriction when the water was up, when some gentleman tried to go down on the inner tube for some reason in the last week or so. So I think there may be some restrictions. I don't know that there's complete restrictions, and I think I'd look that up before I did anything because, and then I'd use some real good judgment again as we talked about before. I mean, if the water's way up and it's real rough and it's dangerous and there's trees underneath it, the water are over, I think it's real dangerous to be kayaking. So I think you ought to check on that before I did anything, and it may restrict what waterways you can do that on. For instance, you can't do it in the Big Ditch maybe, and you can do it in the Arkansas River. I don't know.
Okay, so check the website. Great resource for a lot of information if you have any questions regarding the city. Okay, Charlie, we appreciate it, and we'll see you again next week.
Okay.
Thanks so much, everyone, for calling in. If you didn't get on the line this week, Charlie is here every Wednesday, and he'll be happy to take your call.